Hey, it's Ken Gagnon with YouTube channel Gamebits with this week's IndieSider, where I play indie games and then interview the developer. This week I'm playing Circles by Jeroen Wimmers, released on February 17th on Steam for Mac and Windows. It is a geometric jazz puzzle game. Check it out. I'm using just the trackpad on my Mac, and to start the level I move my cursor to this circle, and the goal is to get to the other circle. That's it. And then I become sort of this red amorphous blob that just absorbs everything in its way, like Katamari Damacy. Now it starts over, but this level is a little bit more complicated. I have to go around. Again, not hard. It keeps building on concepts about how things react to your movement. So in this level, things get bigger as I get closer to them, except for these two circles. These are the exception. This gives me the path I need to get over here. Absorb everything, move on. And now this level, you can see again, some things get smaller as I approach them. So I can see that I need to follow a very narrow defined path to get to the end. That is the only way to finish that level. There's usually only one way to get there. Now that completed 4 levels, and every 4 or 5 levels it mixes it up a little bit. I learned that concept, it built up to stage 4, and now it's time to learn something new. Now this one, it's like a heartbeat. The more I move, regardless of the direction, it pulses. The outer ring gets bigger while the smaller one gets smaller, and vice versa. So I have to time it just right so that I can sneak in between the outer ring and then the inner ring. What is this level going to do? Again, the same thing, it's a heartbeat. But now I need to get across these 2 barriers, and there I am. Now the jazz soundtrack is one of the things that really gets me about this game. It's really noticeable, and it's really unusual to find in a puzzle game. Every time you move or make an interaction with the environment, there are some cymbals, some soft drums, boom, like that. It really accentuates the action, it really punctuates it. Now this one is very narrow. Ooh, ooh, made it. In fact, let me show you what happens when you don't succeed, when you're not as crafty as I have been. You just go touch something, boom. And it snaps your fingers. And then you just have to go back to the starting point. You can play with how the level interacts with you safely, but then you have to go back here if you actually want to finish the level. So I just saw that if I go clockwise, it gets bigger, and if I go counterclockwise, it gets smaller. And I need to reach my counterpart that is orbiting on the other side, which should be much easier once I remove the obstacle by going the other direction. Now this level, same thing, except now there's 2 circles. I need to find my way around them, like that. Let's do a few more of these before I bring the developer of the game on the air to talk about Circles, which you can find at circlesgame.com, by the way. There we go. Let's do another 4 levels. Let's see how these levels work. Okay, so this one, the faster I move, the more those things disappear. So you can see I'm spinning around a lot, they're not anywhere, then I stop, and they come back. Whoops. I was not very careful there, and there we go, got it. So this is sort of like Cubway, another game I played on this YouTube channel, which was not an IndieSider, in that you're trying to get from point A to point B, and you are pretty much just a shape, and there are very few controls. This game has more control. Cubway was simply left and right. It was pretty one-dimensional. But it was also very artistic. It had some narrative poems every time you finished a level, and also was revealing a background as you played the game. This one is much more geometric in its nature, changing color as you play. Okay, so this one, I can see that there's a single spot over on the right there that never fills up. So I have to move quickly and get over there. Oh, didn't make it. Start over. There. Oh, go out slowly past this one. There. So I'll continue playing these levels. This game just came out on February 17th, so this is a bit of a spoiler if you don't want to know how the levels go or how to finish them. But if you do, we can chat with the developer while I'm playing, or you can just listen to the audio podcast at IndieSider.net/circles. Thanks for watching. Today I'm speaking with Jeroen Wimmers of Illusive Games, developer of Circles. Hello, Jeroen.
Hey again.
How are you today?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks. You?
Very good, thank you. So Circles came out in February, and you and I touched base a few weeks before that. You had actually watched a previous episode of IndieSider and reached out to me, and I was eager to get you on the show, but you were just so busy getting ready to launch Circles. What was keeping you busy in the last few weeks before Circles came out?
Yeah, there were a few things. First, I'm the only one doing the game, making the game and doing the marketing. So I was first finishing up the game, making sure everything works, making a demo that was going up, and also sending out all the press releases and everything I was going to say on Twitter, Facebook, all those kind of things. So it was just kind of crazy.
Had development of the game finished by that point?
I would have liked to think so, but in the end there were some things that didn't work, or some like there was one crash that kept popping up, and so I was still tinkering around a bit, but in the end it worked out.
How long were you working on Circles?
Well, it was sort of off and on the first few years, but it started 3 years ago, a little bit more than 3 years, and then the last year of development, like 2016, I've been working on it full time. So it's been about 2 years in total, really working on it.
Wow.
So yeah, quite some time.
What was the hardest part of the game, if there was any one part that took up more of those 2 years than any other part?
Yeah, looking back to it, I think there were quite some parts, how to lay down the ideas of the game without text and how to make that work. But I think the most time was really something you wouldn't expect. That was the UI. So you've got some UI on top of in the game that you can just select some levels with, and it seems like kind of secondary, but this is the thing that when I look back to it, I think it's the most time spent on it, because it took like 5 completely different iterations to get that simple thing up there.
When you started making the game, did you originally intended to not use any language at all, or did you experiment with some sort of menus and labels?
Yeah, in the beginning I did. I had some text from like, this is level 1, this is level 2. At some point that was the only text that was there, and I was like, I can probably be consistent and just have no text at all, and try and design it in a way that seems logical and people don't need text. And so I just stuck with some rules, like the game has no text and the game only has circles and everything has to be like that. That made it quite hard, but also it made the game consistent and look good and feel good. So yeah, in the end it was a choice to just stick with it.
So when you say it made the game consistent and look and feel good, what are some of the benefits in more detail that come from not using language? Certainly you don't have to worry about translation, but does the game benefit from not having language in it?
I think Circles does. It's always different per game, but with Circles I noticed it's a very sort of playful game. You need to experiment with your mouse to see what's going on, and you could explain this in the beginning, like, okay, if you move your mouse fast or slow, like this happens. But you need to explain this to the player in the best way possible. And I think Circles isn't really that logical. It's not like, oh, I know this happens, so I'm doing this, and then you do it. It's more like a bit of subconscious. You find it out and you play with it, and that way you slowly build up a sort of knowledge how the game works. And I think in that way people really understand it in the best way possible, instead of just reading it from a text and then trying to think logical about it.
Yeah, it certainly is a game of discovery where you're experimenting to see how the game reacts to various inputs. I read some of the reviews on Steam, and some people were saying that due to the way you interact with the level and the way that the levels are solved, they were hesitant to call it a puzzle game. Some people called it a skill game or a meditative game. How would you describe Circles?
Yeah, it's funny because seeing those comments and reviews come in, I've always described it as an abstract puzzle game or an intuitive puzzle game, but always the puzzle game part. In a way, it's fair, I think, because they're still puzzles, only they're not as difficult as people usually think puzzles are, especially on Steam. Yeah, I think there's still puzzles, but it's not the main focus to drive you crazy and to make really complicated puzzles with it. But it's just a bit more casual.
That's an interesting word that you would call it casual, because a lot of people associate casual games with mobile games, but your press kit says from the very beginning you intended this game to be used with mouse input, not touch input. Why is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Normally I'm pretty hesitant to say casual, especially on Steam, because that's not what people like to play, and they do on mobile most of the time. But still, having these puzzles in this way makes it more enjoyable to explore and to discover. And this would still work on mobile, I'm sure. But it was just from the beginning, I was making the whole game work with the mouse and design it around how you move the mouse, how it feels. So I've had some experiments with making it work on the iPad or making it work on the mobile, but it worked, but it just didn't feel as intuitive as you would just move your mouse to a place without thinking about it. And on mobile, there's a step between that. You see your finger, and there's still some problems to solve there. So it's mainly for PC.
It reminds me a little bit in that sense of another mobile game that features circles and no language, which is Ellipsis. Have you played Ellipsis?
No, I've not heard of that.
Okay, I'll send you a link after the show. It was developed by a gentleman in Germany, and he released it first for iOS and then for Steam. And he had to experiment with a lot of different input types in order to find one that worked for him.
Yeah, I thought I knew a lot of games, also abstract and puzzles, but Ellipsis, do send it to me.
Sure. I would call Ellipsis sort of a cross between a puzzle game and an action game.
Oh, okay.
But as far as circles goes and various systems that it could or could not appear on, you did something with circles that I've never seen with another game, which was that you made a free embeddable browser-based demo.
Yep.
Did that require that you recreate the game from scratch in another system, or were you able to use the same code that you made for the Steam version?
No, luckily I was able to use the same code and scrap some parts that were needed, but it just uses all the same code, and it's made with good old Flash, so you can still embed that on your website, and it's the same thing, the same program you start up on Steam, only then Air is around it. So it still works pretty well.
But it won't work on mobile devices since it is Flash-based.
Well, actually, no, that also works, because you've got Adobe Air around Flash, sort of, and this way you can export it to, as you play it on Steam, to Windows or Mac, but also Android and iOS, so it's still pretty versatile. So if you wanted to know what it would look like if you were to port this game to be a mobile app, all you have to do is boot up the browser demo. Well, on my iPhone it wouldn't work. I mean, don't in the browser. It doesn't work. But it was relatively easy to just export the project in Air to mobile, to iOS, and then I experiment a bit with it to see what works and what doesn't. Besides the abstract, geometric, very clean and language-free visuals of the game, another thing that really caught my attention, which I really liked, was the integrated soundtrack and how it synchronizes with the player's actions. It feels very jazz-like to me, as opposed to other games like Rez, which feels very techno. So what were you aiming for when you created that soundtrack? First I collaborated with an artist, like a composer, and we worked together to make the music like it is now. And the whole process did start a long time ago with some other people who did music for me. I always had ideas for maybe classical, maybe jazz, maybe just electronic sounds. But in the end, with this guy I'm working with, we picked jazz because it's pretty free flowing, which fits with the game, and it doesn't have a clear beat, which was important. So it's important because the whole game doesn't have a rhythm itself. It's more like you decide what happens, and when you don't do anything, the game just does nothing. So you have to experiment. And the same thing goes for the music. So if you stop, like certain tracks fade out and it gets more quiet, and it waits for you to take action again. So in the end, jazz was a pretty good fit. But even after that, we experimented more with electro, which you will hear in the later worlds.
Of course, since the soundtrack is interactive, that deprives you of the opportunity to sell the soundtrack on Bandcamp.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, you can there's still some compositions in it, but yeah, you're right. Some layers do fade in or out based on your interaction. So you would have to be creative with that. Like see what works best. But yeah, I think it was possible, but just because of the short time, we choose to not do it. But it's probably still possible.
Now, this game is not your first game, but it is very different from one of your previous games, which is Westerado Double Barreled by Ostrich Banditos, which came out a few years ago on Steam. I don't see how one game ties into the other. Granted, you worked on that other game with a lot of other people, but what was your contribution to that previous game?
Yeah, it's hard to see, right? There is my part of the game was mostly the gameplay design and gameplay programming. So whenever you pick out your gun or interact with people or interact with the AI, that's the parts I programmed, and a lot of front end development. So actually, the whole game feel, you could say, is I programmed it. So in a way, I found out that's something I like. So making the gun feel good and making the AI also respond appropriately. But yeah, the game is very different for Circles. I found I just want to focus on the game feel and just the one thing. And Westerado was becoming a huge game, and it is a huge game. So I just decided to keep it small, keep it manageable, and just focus on making a game that feels good to play and that is that you could finish in 6 months or so, development-wise. But in the end, it took 3 years. But still, that's kind of how it started.
So now that you've had these two experiences, which one do you prefer, working on games on your own or working on a team?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, there's benefits to both. One thing I liked from working with the team, it was 4 other people. It's just you get in a rhythm with all of you guys. We worked at one place, part of in school and part home. But you're always working together on it, and it gives you some good motivation, good structure, and you keep up with each other. And of course, when you're working on your own, and especially when I worked from home, that's very different. So there was a part where I just had a hard time motivating myself or working 5 or 6 hours a day or longer, just every day. So in the end, I found it's a lot better to just work with other people, work in places where there's more people to give tips, to talk with. But in the end, I'd like to go on it, make decisions my own at least, and work. So I would like to work on my own game next, but maybe with some more help of other people. But I'll keep it small.
Yeah, working on somebody else's dream is a great way to get experience, but it can be very unsatisfying when you have dreams of your own.
Yeah, it is. Although Westerado we all had our own part in it, so I'm really happy with how it became. But yeah, you're right. In the end, I did have really different ideas of what I wanted to make. But the experience taught me a lot, and I couldn't have done it without it. But I'm glad I was able to continue on my own.
Now, speaking of collaboration, are there a lot of other indie game developers where you are in the Netherlands?
Yeah, there's quite a few, especially indie developers. There's a lot of those. And there's actually not a lot of AAA companies. Of course, you've got Guerrilla with the recent Horizon Zero. There's a game called Horizon Dawn.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Well, but yeah, that's the only big company. But there's quite some indies I know who also work with small teams.
Now, I know that you demoed Circles at PAX East 2016 in Boston, Massachusetts. Did you have to go that far to show off your game? Is there nothing like this in the Netherlands?
Nothing that big, no. I had to go there to really reach a lot of people. And in Holland, I also went to conventions or showcases in Holland. But yeah, of course, it's all a bit smaller, and our gaming industry is also going well, but it's not as big as like PAX East or as America.
What about Gamescom in Germany?
But yeah, I've been there. But what do you mean?
I mean, that thing is massive. Like 1/3 people show up. Is that the sort of place that I've never been to it? Can you show off games like Circles at Gamescom?
Yeah, I actually did. So there's this place where all the countries are showcasing their games and their developers. So I was lucky to be selected and go along with the Dutch, the Holland Pavilion it was called, to showcase together with some other developers. Yeah, that was pretty great. It's like so many people, it was so huge, and it was a great chance to show off the game.
When you show off the game at Gamescom or PAX East, what sort of feedback do you get that you were not expecting? That you thought, oh, this is not working the way I thought it was, I need to change this. Or, hey, that's a great idea, I should do that.
It's always kind of hard to talk about it, because it's always, especially with the first, say, 10 minutes of the game, there were just little things that people weren't getting, like the fact that they just died and it wasn't clear to them, or a certain circle, the behavior of a circle, they didn't get it. But most of the time, the biggest changes were just the length, I think. Especially on a convention, you want to not have it be too long. I just changed the order and the final length of the levels a whole lot. Yeah, I think that's about it. Apart from that, there's just a lot of small things that people weren't getting and I improved on.
It sounds like, based on the Steam reviews, this game can be completed in about an hour. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely Steam gamers. They can do it in an hour, which is faster than I expected, quicker than I expected. I think it takes about 1 or 2 hours when you want to complete it, and then you'll get some extra modes that will change up the gameplay, and that essentially give you a new challenge. And with those, if you got 4 of those, so then you're up to a good, like 4 to 5 hours. But then it's done, and there's no random elements apart from that. And I think that's fine. Like, the game doesn't have to be that long, and it just showcases some ideas that I think are interesting. And if the player gets that after a few hours of playing, I think it's fine when it's done.
So what is next for Circles? Are you planning on adding more levels as DLC, porting it to other platforms, showcasing it at other events? What's next?
Yeah, showcasing it at other events, including South by Southwest really early. And then I think for levels, I won't add too much. And yeah, I would work on the mobile version, which is still I think needs some work design-wise, to probably add some words to it, because it's really hard to explain it on a mobile without any words, and because you still have to hold the screen with your finger. And if you release it, something needs to happen, or show that you're supposed to not do that and keep it on the screen, which is totally not a problem with the mouse. But it's just a totally different way of interacting, and when your whole game is designed around the mouse, just a few things aren't as clear. So I think that's one thing I'll be working on. Great. Well, I look forward to seeing those changes and enhancements to Circles and other versions of it. Remind our listeners where they can find the current version. You can go to the Steam on Humble and on itch.io. And also the main website is circlesgame.com. And there you can find right away the demo and these links to Steam, Humble, and so on. Very good, and there will be links to all of those in the show notes, which you can find at IndieSider.net/circles. Jeroen Wimmers of Illusive Games, thank you so much for your time. Yes, thank you very much.